Year's Eve was supposed to be festive, but for me, it became a nightmare I'll never forget. I was driving back from my best friend Alex's party, the winding country road stretching endlessly before me. The weather was biting cold, and the dense forest on either side of the road seemed to close in, creating an unsettling atmosphere. I had always hated this particular road, too narrow, too dark, and with only one eerie landmark, an old, decaying cabin that looked abandoned for decades. Tonight, as my headlights illuminated the path ahead, something unusual caught my attention. There was a figure standing motionless by the side of the road near the cabin, a woman in a tattered white dress. She didn't flag me down or move, she just stood there, her back to the trees, her head slightly tilted as if she were listening for something. My first instinct was to drive faster. Something about her felt wrong, but guilt gnawed at me. What if she needed help? Against my better judgment, I slowed down and glanced back through my rearview mirror. She was now facing the road, her eyes glowing faintly in the reflection of my brake lights. My heart jumped, and I sped off, deciding that helping her was not my responsibility. A few minutes later, I arrived home safely, or so I thought. But as I parked in my driveway and turned off the car, I felt a strange chill, as though someone was watching me. I checked my mirrors nervously. The back seat was empty. Shaking it off, I got out and went inside, locking the door behind me. The warmth of my house should have been comforting, but the uneasy feeling lingered. Just as I sat down to take off my shoes, I heard a faint knock at the door. It was almost midnight. Who could it be? Cautiously, I peeked through the peephole. No one was there. I stood frozen, my breath fogging up the glass. Then the knock came again, this time from the window in the living room. I turned slowly, heart pounding, and saw her, the woman from the road. She was standing outside, her hollow eyes staring straight at me, her hand pressed against the glass. Her mouth stretched into a wide, unnatural smile, revealing jagged teeth. "Let me in," she said, her voice muffled and distorted. I stumbled backward, grabbing my phone to call the police, but my hands were shaking so badly I dropped it. When I looked back at the window, she was gone. I ran upstairs and locked myself in the bedroom, praying for morning to come. Hours passed in silence. Then, as the first rays of sunlight streamed through the curtains, I heard a soft whisper right next to my ear. "Thanks for bringing me home." I turned in horror, but there was no one there. To this day, I avoid that road. But sometimes, when I'm alone at night, I feel like she's still with me, waiting for another chance to say hello. I was 26 when I took a trip to San Diego to visit a friend. After a few wonderful days, I booked a late-night flight back home. My plane landed around midnight, and by the time I was at the ground transportation pickup point, it was 12:30. Exhausted, I waved down a yellow minivan taxi, relieved to avoid the higher Uber fares. The driver, a man in his mid-40s, greeted me with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He offered to help with my bag, but I declined, placing it on the seat next to me. I gave him my address, and we started driving. The roads were eerily quiet. The highway stretched ahead like an endless void. The silence broke when I noticed him stealing glances at me through the rearview mirror. The first time, I ignored it, but the second time, he spoke. "So, where are you coming from?" he asked. "San Diego," I replied curtly. "Oh, very nice," he said, smiling. "What were you doing there? Visiting someone special?" I told him I was visiting a friend, hoping he'd drop the conversation. Instead, he asked, "Is your friend as pretty as you?" His tone sent a shiver down my spine. I forced a polite laugh, but inside, I was uneasy. He continued with personal questions, even commenting on how a pretty girl like me shouldn't be traveling alone. As we neared my exit, I noticed we were speeding past it. "That was my exit," I said sharply. "Oh, sorry about that," he muttered. "I'll take the next one." My heart raced. Something about his calm demeanor didn't feel right. The next exit was a mile away, and when we reached it, I repeated firmly, "Get off here." This time he complied, but I caught his glare through the Marora look that made my stomach churn. Then he asked, "Do you have a boyfriend?" "Yes," I snapped, lying. "He's waiting for me at home." "What's his name?" he pressed, his tone unnervingly casual. That was the final straw. I popped in my AirPods, pretending to listen to music, and texted my family, sharing my location. My brother, the only one awake, told me to get out of the car if I felt unsafe. We stopped at a red light, and I noticed a police car parked nearby in an empty lot. Without hesitation, I grabbed my bag, slid the van door open, and bolted towards the officer. The driver shouted after me, but he didn't follow. Instead, he sped off into the night. The officer listened as I explained what happened. He offered to drive me home, and I gratefully accepted. By the time I got home, it was nearly 1:30 a.m. I locked my doors, brushed my teeth, and crawled into bed, trying to shake the uneasy feeling. But then, a knock came at my door. My blood ran cold. The knocking persisted for minutes before stopping, only to start again. I stayed frozen in my room, clutching my phone. Finally, the noise stopped, and I drifted into an uneasy sleep. The next day at work, my neighbor George called. He said he saw someone checking my windows last night. Assuming it was my dad, George called to confirm, but my dad denied being there. My stomach dropped as I explained everything to him. That evening, I went home to pack and stay with my parents. As I gathered my things, a creak echoed from the hallway. My breath caught. I turned toward the sound, and from the spare bedroom, a voice whispered, "I wasn't going to hurt you." An arm swung into view. I screamed, bolting for the front door. Outside, I pounded on George's door. He and his wife rushed out as I called 911. Police arrived quickly and searched my apartment. The back door was ajar, leading to the shared backyard. Whoever it was had fled. I stayed with my parents for a week after that. My dad installed cameras on my doors, and I bought a taser for protection. I haven't had to use it yet, but the experience changed me. I avoid taxis now, opting for ride shares that can be tracked. And I still wonder if that driver was even legitimate or if he had far worse intentions.